Hello and welcome to Gaming Rules. Today I, Russell, will be teaching you how to play the 2 to 4 player game Fjordar, designed by Frode Brændø and published by Go to Pieces Games.
When it's released, Fjordar will include a solo mode so you can play it on your own, but in this video I will only be showing you how to play the multiplayer version of the game.
This is a strategic game of battle, area control, route building and set collection set during the turbulent time of the Norwegian Civil War, which lasted from 1130 to 1240 AD. Players take on the roles of rival parties vying to put a pretender on the throne, and they'll do this by finding the right balance between battling their opponents, finding secure routes to bring their heirs home safely, building and burning churches, founding villages, lighting beacons, and making crucial alliances. The game is also played on a unique 3D map that's created by the players as part of the setup, meaning the game is different each time you play. Also worth noting that this is a prototype version of the game, so this may not be fully representative of the final version. Now, before I begin to teach you how to play the game, first let me show you how to set it up. There are two ways to play this game. A basic version with fewer rules and reduced complexity, and the full version of the game with all the rules. In this video, I will only be showing you how to set up and play the full version, but if you'd like to try the basic version, you can find the setup and rule changes included in the game's rulebook. First, you'll need to create the map. If it's your first time playing the game, there is a recommended setup, which I'll be demonstrating for you shortly, but in future games, the players will create the map themselves as part of the setup.
Of the 8 large map tiles included in the box, find the 6 tiles labelled with A1 through to A6 on one side, and of the 2 remaining map tiles, select the one with 6 labels matching the other tiles. Place this latter tile in the centre of your table, and then place the other tiles so that each of the labels lines up with its matching one on the centre tile. Next, take the light green set of tiles, the ones with this pattern, and place them onto the map in the following spots, making sure the symbols on each space are correct. The setup for a 2-player game looks like this. If you're playing with 3 players, you should also place the following tiles. And if you're playing with 4 players, place these tiles too. Now, take the white set of tiles, with this pattern, and place the following ones like so for a 2-player game, adding these extra tiles if you're playing with 3 players, as well as these extra tiles if you're playing with 4 players. Take the mountain tiles next, which all have this beacon symbol on it, and place a single one onto each of the following spots, making sure to cover these extra spots if you're playing at 3 players, and also these positions if you're playing at 4 players. Find the victory point tokens, and if playing with 2 players, set them on all the following locations. If playing with 3 players, only place them on these spots. And finally, for 4 players, only set them on these spaces. Put the rest of the victory point tokens back in the box, as they won't be needed. You may now flip the ones on the map face up, revealing the values on them. Now locate the pieces that represent the castles, ships, villages, forests, churches, and beacons from the box, and start placing them onto the board in the appropriate locations. Castles will be placed on these symbols, but only on spaces that match the current player count. So for example, if you're playing with 3 players, you would not place a castle on this space. The same goes for ships, which you put on spaces with this symbol, but only where the correct player count is written. For the rest of the pieces, place them anywhere their matching symbol appears, so long as there is no victory point token present on that space. Villages go on this symbol, forests on this symbol, churches on this symbol, and beacons on this symbol. For every village on the map, add 2 wood-coloured resource cubes on that space. Put any unused castles and beacons back into the box, as they won't be needed, but leave the rest of the pieces to form a supply somewhere on the table. Place the scoreboard to the side of the map with the full game side face up. Each player will now set up their player area. Take a player aid sheet and place it so that the full game side is face up. Next, each player chooses a colour and takes all of the player components of that colour. Place the double-sided score token with the 50+ side face down onto space 0 of the scoring track. Take the church track token and place it onto the 0 space of the church track on the scoreboard. Take 2 gold and all of the remaining player components and put them into your player area putting the remaining gold within reach of all players as a general supply. Take the hued piece of your colour and place it into your starting castle, which is the one that is situated closest to your seated position around the table. Place one of your laydown pieces into the ship located next to your starting castle. Take 2 of your coloured cubes and place 1 each into your starting castle and ship. Shuffle the battle cards and deal 3 to each player, using the rest to form a battle deck which you should place on the table. Now find the following movement cards: Summer Solstice, Easter, Harvest, and Christmas. Each player will take 1 of each of these cards, and they will form part of your starting hand. If you're playing with less than 4 players, the unused cards should go back into the box as they will not be used. On the scoring track, place an event token face down with this symbol showing onto each green space. Then take the event deck and shuffle it, placing it somewhere near the scoreboard. Now take the alliance tokens, shuffle them into 2 piles face down, and place these onto the appropriate space of the scoreboard.
Now you need to choose a start player. You can either do this by figuring out which of you was the last to chase your enemies across a frozen lake, or you can decide randomly via a method of your own choosing.
Find the 5 Generation 1 leader cards from the remaining movement cards, as noted by the 1 symbol in the corner, and give them to the player in last place, i.e. the player sitting furthest clockwise from the first player. They will choose 1 to keep, passing the rest anti-clockwise to the next player. This continues until all players have chosen 1 card. Discard the unchosen cards.
Please note that when playing with 2 players, the first player to select a leader card will also discard another of the remaining cards that they do not wish the other player to have before passing them on.
Take the remaining leader cards, separating them by their generation number, and then shuffle these small decks individually. Place them face down, starting with the highest numbered generation first, to form a leader card deck. Reveal the first 5 cards from this deck, which should all be generation 2 cards, to form a line leading to the right of the deck. Each player now takes 1 air token from each other player, though in a 2-player game you take 2 air tokens from the other player, as well as 2 of their own colour from the supply. Starting with the first player, each player will now place all of these air tokens into any castles on the board other than their own starting castle. A castle can never contain more than 1 air token of the same colour, but each castle can contain multiple airs. Once a player has finished placing all of their air tokens, the next player in turn does the same. This continues until all players have placed the collected air tokens.
And now you're ready to begin. In Fjordar, players will need to score the most victory points at the end of the game in order to win. Now, players will score points during the gameplay by completing various actions, as well as winning battles, but players will also score points at the end of the game by getting lots of matching symbols from battle cards played, as well as alliance tiles gained, which can be acquired during your turn. Now, let's talk about what happens during a player's turn. When the game begins, starting with the first player and moving clockwise, each player will take their turn by completing all of the following 5 phases in order.
1. Play a movement card. This allows you to gain movement points, which you can spend during the next phase. 2. Movement. You'll spend movement points during this phase to move units around the map. 3. Battle. If you move into spaces occupied by opponents' units, you'll resolve a battle during this phase. 4. Location actions. If you have units on specific spaces, you can perform location actions during this phase. 5. End of turn. You'll score victory points for lit beacons and draw an event card if passing certain points on the score track.
Let's take a look now at each phase in a little more detail. During this phase, you must play exactly 1 movement card from your hand into your play area. These will generate movement points, which you can use to move units around the map.
Before playing a card, you may first pick up all movement cards you have played during previous rounds, adding them to your hand to choose from. If you do not have any movement cards in hand, you must pick up all your movement cards first. When you play a card, you will gain all of the movement points shown on it, as well as being able to use any special abilities that are shown at the bottom. Some cards give you a free action that you can activate at any point during your turn, while others give you bonuses that may aid you during battle, movement, or while doing location actions. I shall cover these later in the video. If you already have at least 1 movement card in play from a previous round, you play your new card to the right of these, like so, to form a line of cards. Doing this will gain you the benefits of any movement in the left margin of the previous played cards. So in this example, playing this card would give you 6 movement points, 4 for the points in the card just played, and 2 for the cards played previously. When playing on top of previous cards, the second card you play in the line is free, but the third card in line costs 1 gold, the fourth card costs 2 gold, with the amount of gold increasing by 1 for each subsequent card played after that. This gold must be paid immediately after playing the card.
This phase is where you can spend movement points gained to move units around the board. Because Fjordar uses a 3D board, there are 4 different heights that each space can be, which factors into movement. To fully understand how movement works, first let me explain about areas.
There are 3 types of areas in the game. 1. A cluster of hexes on the same terrain, colour and level. These will normally never be bigger than 6 spaces and can contain multiple locations. 2. A single hex of sea terrain. 3. A castle, which is considered a separate area by itself. An area can be controlled by a player moving into it, and is noted by the presence of one of their coloured control cubes. Movement within an area is free, though units in an area are considered to have access to all locations in it, regardless of where they stand.
Now that's covered, let's get back to movement. As well as gaining movement points from the previous phase, you may also gain bonus movement points from battle cards played in previous rounds, which are calculated in a similar way. Now we'll talk more about those later, but just don't forget to include these during the movement phase. You will spend movement points to move between areas in the game. You may spend all your movement points to move a single unit, or split them up to move multiple units. You do not have to spend all movement points gained, but any you do not spend are not carried over to the next round. The cost to move into an area depends on height and region type.
It costs 1 movement point to move a unit between 2 adjacent areas on the same terrain level. This includes moving into or out of a castle on the same height, as well as moving into or out of a sea hex, which is considered on the same level. Please note, you can only move into a sea hex if there is a ship you control in that space. It costs 1 movement point to move into an adjacent area that is 1 level below your current one. It costs 2 movement points to move into an adjacent area that is 1 level above your current one. It costs 1 movement point to move into any other area that is connected to your current one by a continuous line of adjacent areas you control. This is called a supply line, and moving this way ignores all other movement point costs, as well as cliffs, which are the spaces between 2 areas with a difference of 2 or 3 height, and cannot normally be traversed other than a movement card ability. It costs 1 movement point to move an occupied ship you control from a sea area to any other unoccupied sea area. Neither friendly nor enemy ships block movement and can be freely moved past. As we've mentioned them, here are a few notes about ships. You still control a ship even when it's empty of units, though they can be taken by other players by movement, or by battle if it's occupied. A ship you control can be part of your supply line. You can only move a ship if you have a unit in it, and ships can only contain a maximum of 2 units. No more than 1 ship can be in any sea hex, and they can never move onto land. When moving into an area you did not control before, place one of your control cubes onto it. If the area is controlled by another player and unoccupied, return their cube and place one of yours there. If it is occupied, movement of your units there must end, and a battle will be resolved for control of that area in the next phase. For the purposes of aiding battles, an area where you have a unit is considered part of your supply line until the end of the current phase, meaning you can spend movement points to move other units into the area, but not through it. If moving into an area containing a victory point token, immediately score those victory points and remove the token from the game.
Battles will occur if a player has at least 1 unit in any area occupied by another player at the end of their movement phase. If multiple battles will occur, the active player chooses in which order to resolve them. Battles have 5 steps which are resolved in order and involve the use of units and battle cards. Let's go through these steps in detail.
1. Add initial battle strength. Determine initial battle strength for each player by totaling the support from units in the battle as well as battle cards played previously. Herds provide 3 strength if they are in the contested area. Leidangs provide 1 strength if they are in the contested area. Laydangs in adjacent areas to the battle also add 1 strength, with 1 additional strength for each terrain level these adjacent laydangs are above the contested area. Finally, any previously played battle cards will activate strength bonuses now. Please note, battle cards may also offer bonus movement points which will be used during the movement phase. 2. Play a battle card. Each player in the battle secretly chooses a battle card from their hand, revealing them simultaneously. Much like the movement cards, battle cards can form a line offering bonuses, so play your card onto any previously played cards, adding all strength on the just played card to your total. Please note, if there are any symbols underneath the main strength symbols on the card you've played, these will only be added if the card played by the opponent has played a matching symbol. 3. Compare total battle strength. Adding up the initial battle strength and the strength on the card played, you can now compare totals. The winner is the player with the higher total, and in the case of a tie, the attacker wins. The winner of the battle gets control of the area, placing a control cube to signify this, or if the defender wins, they keep their control cube in the area. They'll also gain victory points equal to the number of symbols in their battle card line that are the same as the one on the card just played. This is helpfully indicated on the bottom of the battle cards like so. The loser of the battle must retreat to an area of their choosing on their closest supply line. If they have no areas left, they are wiped out. We'll explain what happens if this very unlikely scenario occurs later in the video. They will also apply any losing effects on the battle card they played. These are one of 2 possibilities. This one means you must either remove one of the laydang units in the battle area, or remove one of your played leader cards from the game. If neither are possible, you must instead remove an adjacent laydang unit. If this isn't possible either, you do not suffer any effects. This one means your opponent must remove one laydang unit that participated in the battle from the board. Even if they have no units left as a result, they still retain control of the area. 4. Keep or discard a played battle card. You may now decide to keep the battle card played in your line or not. The first 2 cards played in your line are free to keep, but the third one costs 1 gold to keep, the fourth 2 gold, and every card after costs 1 extra gold to keep in the battle card line. If you do not decide to keep the card, you can remove it or any other card from your line instead. 5. Draw new battle card. Finally, draw a new battle card from the deck to replace the one just played. At any time, you can pay 1 gold to draw 1 battle card for every church you control on the map. You only have a hand limit of 3 battle cards, so if you do this optional action, you must discard down to 3 cards again before continuing.
On the map are several types of locations, indicated by the symbols on the map tiles and the pieces representing them. Each of these gives you the option to perform the action there if you have a unit present during this phase. Let's go through each location and explain what actions are available to you.
Forests can be used to build a ship, found a village, or build a church, but each of these actions will remove the forest from the map. To build a ship, pay 3 gold to the supply, -1 for any church you control on the map to a minimum of 0. Then, place a new ship in the closest empty sea area from the forest you just removed, and always place your control cube in it. The unit that built the ship may immediately move into it as a free move. To found a village, you must have a laydown unit present, which is removed as well as the forest, and you replace them with the village piece along with 2 wooden resource cubes. You will also gain 3 victory points for this action. To work out the cost to build a church, first we need to look at the church track. Each player starts at the top of this track and advances through building and or burning churches. Doing so can net you alliance tiles, which we'll cover later, as well as gold and victory points. If you want to build a church, look at the next space ahead of your token on the track that has the build action on it, and find the associated cost in gold. Once you have paid, you will then place a church piece where the forest was, then move your church track token to the next build space, immediately gaining any benefits listed next to that space. Please note that multiple players can occupy the same space on this track. At a church, the only action available is to burn it and remove it from the map. As with building them, burning them requires looking at the church track. After removing the piece, move your church track token to the next space with the burn action on it, and then gain the benefits associated with that space. Please note that as you get to the end of the church track, it splits in 2, and you may have to move down 1 which only has one type of action available. You can only move forward along this track. Therefore, if you'd like to build or burn a church, but there is no matching action space ahead of you, you cannot do that action. At a village, you have two options, and both require you to remove one resource cube in order to do it. The first is to tax, which is to take 1 gold from the general supply and add it to your own. And the second is to muster, which allows you to take a laydown unit from your personal supply and place it in the village. This newly mustered unit cannot do any location actions this turn. At a beacon, as an action you can light it, which means placing the control cube from the area where the beacon is and placing it into the beacon, allowing you to take a laydown unit from your personal supply and place it next to the beacon. If another player enters an area with a beacon, they take control of that area or resolve a battle for control, removing the appropriate cubes. At a castle, as an action, you can do an air voyage. You can only perform this action if you have an heir present at this castle, and you have an unbroken supply line to at least one other castle that you control. You must move this heir to another castle by moving it through the shortest possible route, counted by the number of areas crossed to get there, to that castle via your supply line. You may move through castles you control to another castle, as long as it's the shortest possible path to the final destination. You will score 1 victory point for each control cube your heir passes, including the start and end areas. After you reach the destination, take the heir token and place it on the lowest empty spot on the heir track situated on the scoreboard, immediately gaining any points listed above that space on the track. Then, as a reward, you may either take a leader card from the available display or an alliance tile. When you take a leader card, you immediately add that card into your hand, and the gap in the display is filled by moving cards to the right to fill it and replacing the leftmost space with another card from the leader deck. When taking an alliance tile, you have 2 options. Either draw 2 face-down tiles from the stacks and look at them, choosing one to keep face down in your player area and discarding the other one face up in the discard pile. Alternatively, you may pick the face-up tile from the top of the discard pile instead, adding it to your player area face down. Units can only do 1 action each round, so if you have a unit in an area with multiple locations, you must only choose a maximum of 1 action for that unit. On the flip side, if a location allows it, multiple units can do an action at the same place. At the end of your turn, you'll score 1 victory point for every beacon in which you have a control cube. You will also draw, resolve, then discard an event card if you triggered one during your turn. This happens if you score any points that cause your score token to move past a face-down event token on the score track. If this occurs during your turn, you must flip the first one you pass over to its draw event card side. Any further ones you or other players pass on the same turn are not flipped over, but other players may be able to trigger them in future turns. In the rare case that more than one player moves over a token during the active player's turn, only flip over the one lowest on the score track, leaving the others. If the event deck is empty when you need to draw a card, shuffle the discard pile to form a new event deck and then draw one. Events can be one of 4 different types and represent the passage of time, spawning new forests, adding new heirs, and growing new resources. Let's take a look at the different cards. In these events, starting with the player to the left of the active player, each person places a forest in an empty hex on a base or level 1 space. In these events, every player takes an heir token belonging to the player on their left and places it in a castle that doesn't contain an heir of that colour. In these events, all villagers with less than 2 resource cubes on their tile will now gain 1 resource cube. During these events, remove a number of the rightmost leader cards according to the number of players in the game. Then, refill the display by shifting cards to the right and filling from the leader deck.
I quickly touched upon these earlier on in the video, but during your turn, the movement or leader card you play may give you a free action, which can be activated once at any time during your turn. Now, all of the iconography in the game is explained in the rulebook, but I'll briefly explain a few of these for reference.
Gain 1 gold. Gain 1 gold from the general supply. Place 1 new laydown on the board. You may place 1 laydown from your personal supply into any area you control on the map. You may use it this turn if you place it before the phase in which you wish to use it. Gain 1 ship. You may place a ship into any empty sea area. Because you are placing and not building, Any shipbuilding effects do not occur. Gain 1 victory point per. For every matching piece in areas you control when this action is triggered, gain 1 victory point.
If during the game you should find yourself with no areas under your control, you are wiped out. Now this rarely happens, but if it should, simply follow these instructions at the beginning of your next turn.
First, place a control cube in 3 empty areas, or, if there aren't enough, in unoccupied areas controlled by the player that currently has the most victory points, making sure to remove their cubes if so. Then, place a new ship with your control cube in it in an empty sea area, and, following that, place your Fjord unit and 2 Ledang units in any of the 4 areas you now control as you wish. Finally, choose a new leader card from the display and add it to your hand.
The game's end is triggered when any player gets to 50 or more victory points. The active player will then finish their turn as usual, then as a reward for ending the game, they will gain an alliance tile using the normal rules, then all other players will gain 1 final turn. If you should exceed 50 victory points, simply flip your score token to signify adding 50 to the total, then continue moving around the score track.
There is one final round of scoring after all players have taken their final turns. First, reveal any alliance tiles you have collected, and then add up the total number of each of the 4 symbol types shown here that are on your alliance tiles and battle cards in your battle line. Then, use the following chart on the bottom of your player board to calculate how many points you get for each symbol. For example, if you have 5 crowns and 3 coins, you would score 14 and 5 points respectively. Once you have done this for all symbols, the player with the highest total number of victory points is declared the winner. In the case of a tie, the player with the most airs on the air track is considered the winner, with further ties broken by the player with the most units on the board. If there is still a tie, players share the victory.
And that is how to play Fjordar. The rulebook contains more information about the leader cards and their abilities, as well as a simplified battle sequence guide, as well as description for all the iconography in the game too. There is also a full guide on how to create your own maps at the start of each game as well. And that is it for me on this video. If you have enjoyed, please consider giving it a like. And if you have any questions for me or about the game, drop them as a comment below and I'll do my best to get back to them as soon as I can. If you have enjoyed this video, there's plenty more great content on the Gaming Rules channel, so why not subscribe while you're here? And I also create content of my own under the name For Chits and Giggles. I will leave some information about how to find me on all of the various social medias in the description to this video. So that's it from me. So until next time, take care and thanks for watching.
Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.